Is there a place in time where logic breaks down and wonderment begins? Could that be somewhere or sometime along an indefinable line between the reasonable and the highly unlikely? Makeshift Stories presents a monthly journey into the improbable.
Today's story, episode 218, The Explorer Project. Read by Mitchell 2. Opening and closing theme by Matthew Erdman. Somewhere and sometime, what is not seen may be more important than what is. Bowie was buffeted by the wash of the rotor blades as the helicopter lifted off the deck and swung out over the choppy Arctic waters of Baffin Bay. She stepped away from the landing pad and spun around excitedly to suck in the view. Explorer 11 was anchored just off the east coast of the Greenland corporate independence. The island's majestic mountains, once snow-capped year-round, were now bare polished rock, which seemed to almost glow in the midnight sun. "Wow," she exclaimed, yelling to overcome the guttural whoop-whoop-whoop of the receding helicopter. "Welcome on board, Explorer!" An enthusiastic, middle-aged man shouted as he approached. "The science lead sends his apology for not meeting you personally. He's in the field." The tall, lanky man waved in the general direction of the shoreline. "We're not sure when they'll be back. It depends on what they find, I guess. I'm Lucas Nielsen, Marketing, Partnerships, and PR Director." He extended a carefully manicured hand. "Quite a title," Bowie commented, then shook the proffered hand, eyeing the reddish blotches on the man's forearm, a common indication of UV damage. "You worked at the South Pole?" "How'd you know?" "The blotches on your arm. Is the UV as bad down there as the reports claim?" He paused for a moment to consider how to answer. "The ozone hole has drifted into the mid-latitude dead zone, so no, it isn't right now. But my skin is more susceptible than most. I was born on board Explorer 1. My parents were part of its original crew, so I grew up floating around the Antarctic Ocean. I opted not to get the UV damage on my arms repaired. It gives me more credibility when I'm negotiating with the onshore. Anyone not living in an arcology will have similar skin damage, and few can afford the trip to one of our onboard clinics. I'll have it fixed when I move to a less public position," he explained casually, eyeing the back of Bowie's hand. "Your bio says you were lucky enough to live in the Cascadian arcology, so you're one of the fortunate. But I know you're not here to listen to me quote your bio or hear about my personal story. Your specialty is climate modeling, and I understand your new work could revolutionize the field." "I wouldn't say revolutionize," Bowie blushed. "I need the Explorer Project's satellite data and computing resources to confirm my ideas. Onshore governments don't have satellite coverage anymore, and none of them have the resources to launch new ones. That's why I applied to the project, and I'm very grateful to have been selected." "There's no need to be modest," Lucas assured her. "You are the best in your field, an obvious choice for our recruitment program. You would have been eventually approached if you hadn't applied. Unlike the onshore, we have few constraints here. The private foundation behind us maintains ocean-based spaceports all around the globe. The northernmost one is not that far from here. So we have more than adequate access to orbit. Only the world's best and brightest work with us, and Explorer has almost infinite resources to support them. Now, can I show you around the ship? 11 is the newest and the most advanced research platform in our fleet." Bowie bent down to pick up her bags. "Don't worry about that," Lucas explained. "One of the porter bots will take them to your quarters. You've been assigned to a cabin on the Excelsior deck. It has great views of the ocean and a balcony. Come on, we'll start our tour with the bridge." Lucas led Bowie through a waterproof hatch into the ship's superstructure. She had seen pictures of Explorer 11 on the net, but in real life, The ship looked even more like a suborbital space plane had been merged with a superyacht than the photos suggested. From the bridge, located near the top of a gracefully curved tail-like tower at the rear end of the ship, she could see the iconic dome of the science labs, which looked like the top half of a weather balloon had been grafted to the deck. "It's bigger than I thought," Bowie admitted. "Pictures don't really give you a sense of scale, do they?" Lucas said with a sense of pride. Bowie couldn't decide if the man truly felt that way or if he had fallen into some well-practiced marketing spiel. "She's longer than the last great cruise ship and has room for up to 1,000 scientists and their related support services. There are currently over 100 labs, all dedicated to finding solutions to the world's most pressing problems." Lucas caught himself, looking momentarily embarrassed. "I know I sometimes sound like a recruiting brochure, but this is such an incredible project." "Let's head down to the science decks," he suggested, and turned to leave. Bowie looked out the curved windows of the oceanography lab, staring at the distant mountainous shore, trying to spot a research support vessel. "They're too far away to see," Lucas noted, coming up from behind Bowie, making her jump. "They're tucked in tight to the coast, doing a survey of new invasive species. There's been a lot of disruption with the changes in ocean temperature. Whole ecologies are shifting north. It's important work." Bowie swung around to face the almost empty lab. A single technician was focused on a monitor, angled so she couldn't see what was on the screen. "Our research out there," Lucas nodded to the windows, "will help us understand how to reintroduce species to the dead zones. Isn't that right, Jin?" Distracted, the technician simply looked up and waved. "Jin is processing data from the survey. We should probably leave her alone," Lucas suggested. "Let's see where you're going to work." They were almost to the top of the research dome where Bowie's new lab was located when she stopped Lucas in the passageway. "My head is spinning. There's so much going on here, but I'm only seeing lab technicians and support staff. Where are the researchers?" "Researching, of course." Lucas laughed at his lame joke. "No, seriously, they're out supervising field research. Others are at conferences presenting findings or are onshore consulting. The type of science we practice here is very hands-on. We go to where the problems and data are." He started walking away, then stopped outside a door. "I believe this is your computer lab, Bowie. It's set up to your specifications. We want our scientists to be happy and succeed." He smiled, then pushed through the door, startling the tech on the other side. "Oh, Mr. Nielsen, you scared me," the tech exclaimed. "Hikaru, I'd like you to meet Dr. Bowie Sanchez, our new lead of climate modeling. Hikaru is loading the most recent version of your program." The tech immediately pushed his chair out and stood up, anxiously offering Bowie a hand. "Dr. Sanchez, I look forward to working with you. I'm familiar with your research on general circulation models and the new mathematical equations you are proposing to use to generate them. It's very exciting stuff." "Yeah, it is," Bowie agreed demurely. "But it still requires verification. That's why I'm here." She shook the technician's hand, noticing how nervous the man appeared to be. "I'm really quite easy to work with," she added, hoping to reassure Hikaru. Lucas pressed his hand to one ear. That's when Bowie noticed the tiny device, which reminded her of a hearing aid. He looked distracted for a few seconds, then announced, "I'm afraid I'll have to leave you in Hikaru's capable hands. I have some business I need to attend to. If you need anything else, just ask him." Lucas left quickly, leaving Bowie and Hikaru staring at each other. "I wonder what that was about," Bowie asked, rhetorically. Hikaru shrugged and appeared to relax a bit. "I don't know. Mr. Nilsson is always in demand." Looking around the cavernous computer lab, Bowie asked, "Hey, where is everyone?" The place feels deserted. The diminutive technician shrugged again. It's always like this. People come and go. Field work and transfers, that's what they say. The ship is mostly crewed by support staff and bots. We have 2 robots in the lab here to help. They fetch things like food or equipment, so we can focus on our work. Is there ever a time when most of the researchers are on board? Bowie asked, distractedly, wandering over to one of the empty workstations and settling into its chair. Most of the equipment looks like it's never been used, she noted with surprise, running her fingers experimentally across a keyboard still covered in protective plastic. It is new, Hikaru confirmed. The ship is only a few months old, so they're still staffing out the science department. How long have you been stationed here? Since the Explorer 11 was commissioned, about 7 months. And before that? This is my first posting, Hikaru admitted sheepishly. I just finished my graduate degree in data science. I had top marks and I know your work. I'm sure you're going to do just fine, Bowie assured. Where did you study? The Antarctic Independence University. I did both of my degrees online. Like Mr. Nilsson, I was born on one of the Explorers. My parents are part of the Founders Group. The technical staff and crew are all seaborne, like me. Interesting, Bowie noted. So, the researchers are? Mostly from the onshore ecologies, like you. They come and go fairly quickly, at least since I've started. There's a lot of moving around in the organization if you are a scientist or a researcher. The permanent offshore staff, like me, tend to stay in one place. Bowie caught a note of resentment in Hikaru's voice. She quickly changed the subject. If you can show me to my cabin, then to the place where everyone eats, that's all I need for now. I've got some updates for my program on my laptop. We can install them tomorrow. I'd be glad to. Hikaru smiled, shut down his terminal, and led Bowie through the door into the passageway. The next day, Bowie found herself anxiously hovering behind Hikaru as he worked. My new system will allow us to refine our climate models by reducing the grid cell size, which in turn increases detail and accuracy. At least, that's the theory. Bowie added the caveat out of habit. I couldn't completely confirm that it works using the resources available on shore because it can only run at high resolution on a quantum computer, Hikaru cut in, and the only remaining quantum computers are owned by the Explorer project. Right, Bowie agreed. That's why I'm here. On paper, the math works. I've done a proof of concept by training the system with ground-based data on an old supercomputer. The results were ambiguous, but showed potential. How so? Hikaru asked. They hint at a deviation from published Explorer projections. It edges on statistical insignificance, yet it's there. What that means, we won't know until we run the model at full resolution on your quantum computers. Another couple of minutes, Hikaru announced, while watching his screens. You have a lot of updates, he noted. We are supposed to have the most accurate modeling currently available, but your work is needed to confirm the latest observations. Yes, a 0.05 degree drop in global temperatures in the last year, attributed to the new space shades the Explorer project has launched. If true, that's quite an accomplishment, Bowie admitted. And the launch cadence is only increasing, the technician added enthusiastically. There's 20 more repurposed oil platforms coming online this year alone. That's almost double our space launch capacity. In 10 years, the shield will be finished. Hikaru's terminal beeped. The patches are complete, he confirmed. Bowie handed Hikaru a data cube, carefully packed in foam. With the state of onshore networks, this cost a lot to assemble. There's only a few undersea cable connections still working, so bandwidth is expensive. Hikaru accepted the fragile package and gently separated the cube from its protective wrap, then connected the storage device to a port on his terminal. They both watched a progress bar crawl across the screen. When it finally disappeared, Hikaru launched the modeling program and hit the process button. It's going to take a while, the tech announced. Let's go get something to eat. Bowie and Hikaru had just settled into their seats in the nearly empty galley when Lucas appeared out of nowhere and stood behind Bowie. I'll take that you two taking a break means you're making good progress, he smiled, trying to look sincere. Our sunshade will, at minimum, cause a 1-degree decline within the decade. I'm confident your new method will confirm our very conservative estimates. Some are claiming 2 degrees, but we'd never publish that without data to back them up. That's where you come in, Dr. Sanchez. Bowie twisted around to face the director. We've just finished updating my modeling software, and currently are processing the data I brought with me from the onshore ground-based stations. I'm not sure why you'd waste your time on such a shoddy dataset, Lucas huffed. You should run ours instead. It's much more complete and accurate. It's just a test, Lucas. I used it on the onshore while I was building the system. It's my baseline, so I can measure how much the resolution of the model increases when the program is run on your quantum supercomputers. Still, the director started to complain. This run won't be used for any public projections. I'll use Explorer project data for that, Bowie assured. Lucas seemed somewhat appeased by the explanation, then nodded at Hikaru. I'll make sure you get a new data dump tomorrow from our WeatherSat network. Lucas forced a smile, but it was obvious he wasn't happy with her choice, and left. I'm surprised how marketing keeps such close tabs on research, Bowie observed, critically. He's nice enough, but I'd rather be dealing with the science lead. Our science lead, Dr. Lorenz, is on an extended tour of the other explorers. Lucas is the ranking official on board right now, and has been since I got here, Hikaru explained, turning back to his meal. I was led to believe Dr. Lorenz was doing field research along the coast, Bowie grumbled. That's news to me, Hikaru shrugged. But then again, I'm a tech. I only hear things secondhand. When they returned to the lab, the training dataset had been run and the model was ready. That was fast. It would have taken 3 weeks to run through on shore, Bowie exclaimed. I know I said the dataset was just to test the model's resolution, but I want to use it to create a 5-year projection anyway. I'm curious to see how quickly your quantum computer can grind through a projection. Even a month's forecast would have taken a year with the resources I had. I think we should wait for the new data, Hikaru insisted. I don't see why, Bowie objected. We won't get the new dataset until tomorrow, and I'm sure we'll have the results before we get back here in the morning, so it won't slow us down. Reluctantly, Hikaru started the setup. How far forward do you want to go? Let's try 5 years. Bowie was on the forward deck, leaning against the transparent safety rail, watching the Arctic midnight sun crawl across the southwestern horizon just above the line where the ocean met the sky, when she heard someone approach from behind. She spun around and found herself face to face with Lucas. It spooks most people the first time they experience it. He donned a pair of sunglasses, then joined her at the rail. This far north, the sun doesn't set from mid-April to almost the end of August. Did you know at the poles the sun stays up for 6 months? We'll be heading to Antarctica before it goes below the horizon for winter. That way we can run on solar. Lucas leaned out over the rail and stared into the dark Arctic water. Did you know when I was a teen, there was still the odd iceberg floating around the coast up here? Bowie shook her head, interested in where this was going to lead. I went out with my mother once to measure melt rates. I was blown away by how much of an iceberg is hidden below the waterline. I'm not sure how many people still remember that fact. I'd like you to think of the Explorer project as an iceberg. There is a lot more to it than what you can see, and if your work helps us, you might get to understand the full scope of what we are trying to accomplish. I hope you have a good rest, Dr. Sanchez. Lucas pushed back off the rail and turned to walk away. His shadow almost stretched back to the thick glass of the forward observation room. "Keep what I've told you in mind as you work," he suggested, then left Bowie alone with her thoughts. She felt a shiver rise up her back as the man walked away. The next day, Bowie examined the results with growing puzzlement. "What's the matter?" Hikaru asked. "The 5-year projection. It should show either a plateau or a slight downward trend. Look at this." Bowie waved the tech over to her screen. "It's predicting an accelerating increase. That can't be." Hikaru scrutinized the graph. "This is based on your test data from the remaining ground-based weather stations. That's not very many data points, so the model is using a lot of interpolation. It would only take a handful of malfunctioning sensors to throw the prediction off. Anyway, you only wanted this run as a resolution benchmark to compare to the last model you built on shore. It looks like your predictions are correct. The grid cell size is down to 500 cubic meters. You should be happy." Bowie leaned back in her chair, massaging her forehead. "Still, I cleaned the dataset myself and removed all the questionable sources. I guess I didn't get all of them, but I wouldn't have expected such divergent results." "I just got the dump from the Explorer WeatherSat net. Let's run it instead," Hikaru suggested. "Do you want me to delete the test run model?" No, I'll take care of it," Bowie volunteered. "Start a new build under a different name with the Explorer data. Then you can go for an early lunch. I'll catch up in a bit. I want to know what I missed. You'll learn from your mistakes, right?" Hikaru nodded, then went back to his terminal. By the time Bowie caught up to Hikaru in the galley, he had finished lunch and was deep in a hushed conversation with Lucas. They both looked up when she approached and stopped talking. "Working hard again, I see." Lucas smiled and waved her over. "We saved the best seat for you with a great view of the shoreline. The clouds sticking to the mountains today are magnificent, don't you think?" As Bowie took the proffered chair, she pretended not to notice the tension her presence appeared to have created. "Hikaru here has been telling me how fabulous the resolution of your model is, now that you're using our quantum computer. He also mentioned you're running our SAT data. That's great. I'm hoping to do a press release, maybe even a live video stream if the results are as promising as we hope, as I'm sure they will be." "I'd hold off a bit, Lucas," Bowie suggested. "At least until we see the results and verify them." "You're right, of course, Dr. Sanchez. We can afford to wait a bit, but not too long. There is a lot of interest, and many decisions are waiting on the outcome." "Hikaru tells me you're very thorough. I'll tentatively slot something for next week." Bowie began to object, but Lucas got up to leave. "It's good to hear you're making such great progress. I'm looking forward to telling the world." When Bowie entered the computer lab early the next morning, she was surprised to find Hikaru already there. "The new build was completed a couple of hours ago, so I came in early to run a new 5-year projection based on Explorer data," he explained. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Hikaru, but I would have preferred you wait until I was here," she admonished, then softened her tone. "So, have you looked at the new projection?" The young technician's face broke into a big smile. "We have successfully modeled the temperature for the next 5 years in exquisite detail, and the grid cells in the latitudes directly under the sunshade show almost a 2.5 degree temperature reduction. Overall, we're getting a 1.5 degree reduction. Lucas will be over the top." Bowie dropped down into the seat beside Hikaru and stared at the temperature graphs, then reached over and moved the geolocation a few times, made a face, then slumped back into her chair and sighed. "Well, that certainly does look like good news, but even if the onshore data wasn't clean, there shouldn't be that much of a difference. I need some time to think about this." "But the results are better than we hoped," Hikaru insisted stubbornly. I know, but When the results from 2 different datasets disagree this much, there is something wrong, and I need to figure it out. Look, if it turns out to be ground station sensor errors, the onshore needs to know about it. They depend on those stations for short-term weather forecasting. I'm going to compare the energy inputs before I tell the boss. There won't be much for you to do, so feel free to take the rest of the day off. A few hours later, Bowie found herself sitting in the waiting room of the director's office, complaining to the receptionist. Really, I should be talking to Dr. Lorenz, not marketing and PR about this. That's who I requested. Why am I here? She protested. Director Nielsen has the complete confidence of the scientific lead, Dr. Sanchez, the nameless person behind the desk assured her. The door to the inner office burst open, and Lucas walked through, greeting Bowie with a smile. For an instant, she thought she could see Hikaru in the office beyond, but Lucas closed the door before she was sure. Sorry to keep you waiting, Doctor. I hope you don't mind talking on the go. We've both got an urgent off-ship appointment to attend. With Dr. Lorenz? It's about time I got to meet him. She almost had to run to keep up as the director swept through the outer office and into the passageway beyond. Mr. Nilsson, I think I found an anomaly in the Explorer data. Later, once we're in the air, Lucas dismissed. We need to hurry. There's a chopper on the helipad warming up for us. But why the rush? To make the connection before it leaves. What connection? Bowie called after the receding back of the man. She turned and ran after him. A few moments later, they spilled out of a hatch onto the open upper deck. A sleek private helicopter with an Explorer Project logo emblazoned on its side, rotor blades spinning impatiently, waited for them. Lucas let a confused Bowie climb into the passenger cabin, then hopped in after her, and slid the door shut with a fatal clunk. It was too late to object, she suddenly realized. The director motioned to the pilot, and the machine lifted off so fast Bowie was pushed back into her seat. Lucas waited until the helicopter had leveled out and started to speed away from the ship. We knew you would eventually find out, he admitted. Find out about what? Bowie complained. I've discovered an anomaly in the solar radiation inputs in your data. There's an easy fix. The grid cells at the equator were miscoded with temperatures from cooler latitudes. Now that I found it, I can... We just didn't want you to figure it out so fast, Dr. Sanchez. Lucas interjected, cutting her off. At least, not until after the news conference about your success, he added. Success at what? I don't understand. Your success, confirming the effectiveness of our Sunshade project. But I already compensated for the problems in the dataset and the new projection. Agrees with your test data from the onshore weather stations. I had hoped Hikaru could have convinced you not to run a projection with that data, Lucas sighed. But you did, and that means you now need to understand what's below the waterline. You're not making sense, Bowie complained, getting a bad feeling that something she wouldn't like was about to be revealed. Remember how I compared the Explorer project to an iceberg? What you have been seeing up till now, it's just the tip. Dr. Sanchez, we accepted your research application because you are the type of person we want. Young, smart, ambitious. You could be a perfect fit. Bowie looked confused. You've already made me a part of Explorer. Lucas slowly shook his head, then gave her a feral smile. Only the visible tip, which is not the real project. We're in a hurry for 2 reasons. 1, we can't have you present this afternoon when we announce how you helped us confirm our results. 2, there is a space transfer vehicle on a floating launch pad about an hour south of here, and there is, potentially, a seat on it for you. A seat? Bowie twisted angrily against her restraints so she could face Lucas. What do you mean, a seat? Normally, we have a year or more to indoctrinate our potential recruits. Eventually, most discover the real purpose of the project. But you were so fast, Bowie. We've had to improvise. The truth is, the Explorer project the world knows is a front. A way for us to attract the best minds this planet has to offer. Our mission statement is to ensure the survival of the human race. That part is true, and we are totally committed to such a laudable goal. However, we have never said how we are going to accomplish such a feat. We've hollowed out an asteroid and are building a new world in it. The Sunshield provides us with a cover story for our space launches. There is no Sunshield. There never was, and it wouldn't have worked anyway. Just like there are no ocean-based atmospheric CO2 scrubbers, and there is no way to rehabilitate the dead zones on the planet. Lucas stopped for a moment to look out the window. I have to admit, it was a beautiful world, but it's time to move on, and you have a choice. Lucas nodded to the pilot. The door on Bowie's side of the helicopter began to slide open. Air suddenly ripped into the tiny cabin, sucking out anything not tied down. You can stay and do field research. Lucas nodded at the half-open door, yelling over the buffeting wind. I understand this part of the Arctic Ocean still contains a lot of opportunities, but you'll have to jump off now to pursue them. Or you can catch that launch and be working in a fabulous lab in Vesta in 3 months, helping us build a new world. It's your call. Finally, I'd like to thank Dr. Bowie Sanchez. Without her groundbreaking research, we would not be able to provide such promising news this afternoon. Unfortunately, like all our scientists, she is so busy she could not attend today's news conference. Instead, I'll turn things over to our new chief data scientist to explain how we got these amazing results. The camera swung away from Lucas to focus on Hikaru. He smiled, then launched into a carefully crafted explanation of the new projections. Makeshift Stories is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, locally grown, community supported. To get other great APN podcasts, head over to albertapodcastnetwork.com and take a listen to Quantum Kickflip and join 6 Edmonton comedians as they play Slug Blaster, a sci-fi tabletop role-playing game. This episode of Makeshift Stories is brought to you by Pod Power. With Pod Power, our sponsors are making it possible for us to amplify the voices of Albertans and Alberta podcasters. This episode, Edmonton Community Foundation is helping us give a Pod Power shout-out to Overdue Fines. Overdue Fines is an Edmonton Public Library podcast. Bryce Crittenden and Caroline Land host conversations about books, movies, music, pop culture, and other interesting news about Edmonton. It's a great way to learn more about what's happening at EPL and about how you can use your library card to access all of EPL's in-person and online services. To listen and find out more about Overdue Fines, head over to epl.ca/podcast. This episode of Makeshift Stories is also brought to you by the Calgary Foundation, proudly supporting community needs for 65 years. When you make a gift to the Calgary Foundation, it's a gift that keeps on giving. The Foundation's knowledgeable staff will provide advice on the community's most pressing needs, keeping your interests at heart and helping you give back in a way that is meaningful for you. Your contributions are invested in an endowment fund that provides a permanent source of funding allowing you to make an impact now and forever. If you're a professional advisor creating a giving plan for a client, or a donor wanting to give back to the community, discover a wealth of resources at calgaryfoundation.org to learn more. Or check out Calgary Foundation's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Makeshift Stories is released twice a month around the 1st and the 15th. This month's story was written by Alan V. Hare and read by Mitchell II. Opening and closing themes composed and recorded by Matthew Erdman. If you'd like to connect with us, please send an email to makeshiftstories@gmail.com or visit our website at makeshiftstories.com. Links to both are in the show notes. You can help us out by getting your friends to subscribe or follow wherever they listen to audio. Makeshift Stories is released under a Creative Commons non-commercial attribution no derivative license, which means you are free to share our stories. Just remember to credit us and don't alter anything.